And look, we're going through I know a lot of my colleagues are tired of hearing me saying this, but we're going through a period in American history which is one of those inflection points in history. The Cold War is over. The Cold War era is over. We're in an entirely new era. Everything's changed, not because of any single woman or man, because the nature of things that have changed. Think of the transitions that are taking place in the world, unrelated to who the leadership is. Think of what's going on, whether it's global warming or whether it's the idea that whole alliances are breaking down and being reestablished. And it seems to me that our safety depends, and security depends in large part on who our partners are, who our allies are. They matter. So you're going to need a position that have to deal with. One of the things I'm proudest of is I've rebuilt NATO. I say I, but I did. For real. I mean, by the way, I spent over. No. I haven't said that. It took me over. We calculated 120 hours with these world leaders, individually, speaking to them individually. Why it was important. I remember getting a phone call 10 days before he died from Dr. Kissinger, saying, "Joe, I was half the time in a different position than Kissinger was, because I was a senior senator at the time during the Vietnam War by that time." And he said, "Not since Napoleon has Europe not looked over the shoulder with dread at what was going on in Moscow. Till you guys came." He said you, but it's not me. You came along. We've improved NATO. We strengthened it. We put it back together again. We're in a position where we were able to convince. Did you ever think we'd be in a position, those of you who are students of history, where Japan would be spending 2% of its GDP on defense? We get 50 nations to support our efforts in Ukraine. Why? Because the world's gotten so damn small. So damn small. They all understand what happens in my neighborhood is going to affect every neighborhood. We're putting together alliances in the South Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, the Quad. Did anybody ever think we get India, Japan, Australia, United States in one organization? The point I'm making is everything's changing. I've known Putin for over 47 years, met with him many times. I remember when I met with him in the off period between the time that we were elected and before we were sworn in. Or just after we were sworn in. Actually, before we were sworn in. No, that's true. Just after we were sworn in early February. And I wanted to talk about reestablish arms control and dealing with nuclear weapons. And he started to talk about how Russia had changed and so on and so forth. And he talked about he has 8 time zones. I said, yeah, 8 time zones around the Arctic Circle. And guess what? The ice is melting. And what's coming out is not greenhouse gases. It's methane. You're never going to control it. It's not going to refreeze. What are you going to do about it? So my point is, so much is changing. And think about this. You know, if we don't lead the world, who leads? And that's not a criticism of any of our allies. But who has the capacity to try to hold the world together? Not a joke. We can do it without going to war. We can do it as we've been able to do, God willing, since we've come into office. We can do it without sending American forces into place. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, you know, let me close with what I call the Senate point of personal privilege. You know, my father used to say, it's a lucky person who wakes up with both feet in the ground and believes that what he or she does matters. Well, you're among the lucky few. What you do really is going to matter economically and politically. But one piece of unsolicited advice, and I was reluctant to say this to the press here, but I'm going to do it anyway, because they know the facts here. Going back to when I told you when I got elected, I didn't want to stay. Teddy Kennedy and Fritz Hollings and Tom Eagleton and a number of Republicans as well, there were 9 of them, decided to, you know, keep me engaged and invite me to everything they were doing. And Teddy used to come over to my office and say, let's go to lunch. And I wanted no part of going to lunch or getting to know anybody. I just wanted to do my job, get down on Union Station and go home. I mean, for real. And many of you have been through what I've been through and a lot worse. And so one day he walks over and says, I won't use his exact language, he said, darn it, Joe, you're going to lunch with me. So I went over to the private Senate dining room. There's 2 Senate dining rooms. One dining room you'll be able to take someone if you're a senator, and the House is not fundamentally different. But in the Senate, I was fairly successful at bringing together coalitions as a senator. I don't mean but I work like hell, and Barack used to always kid me. We'd meet every morning. The first thing we'd meet with one another at 9 in the morning every morning, and the last person we'd each speak to at night, and we ended the day was with one another. That's a deal we made. And one of the things was he always used to say that, I know, and I'd always I said, look, Barack, all politics is personal. All politics is personal. And the reason I mention that is that I went over, Teddy had me come over to the Senate. There used to be a Senate dining room. When you walk in the first floor on the Senate side, you go down that hall on the first cross corridor by the elevators. One goes into the Foreign Relations Executive Committee room, another goes down to the staircase going up to the floor, as well as an elevator, and there's an office door on the left and one on the right. On the right is a Senate dining room. Those of your senators are going to be able to bring any of your colleagues or friends in to have lunch with you. But the door on the left used to be a private Senate dining room. You had to be only a U.S. senator was allowed in. And you walked in, and it was a T-shaped. You walked in, and there was a buffet table on the left, which had all luncheon material out, and a long table on the right, like a big dining room table, but it was seated, I'm guessing, 18 to 20 people. And then you walk straight ahead, and perpendicular was another table by windows looking out over the parking lot. And there was another table that held 20 or so people. That was a Democratic table. And so what would happen, Teddy brought me in. He said, all I want you to do is, yes, and you know this to be the case,